Let me list some of the most famous Christians that you've probably heard of. Charles Spurgeon, Robert Murray McCheyne, Samuel Rutherford, Hudson Taylor, George Mueller, all of them. What you need to understand is that if they were in some ways spectacular brothers among us, it was only by the grace of God. Paul said, I am what I am because of God's grace. I worked harder than all of them, but it was God's grace working in me. Also, you need to understand that if those men were to stand before God in their own righteousness, they would have nothing to do with God and God nothing to do with them. Even the great ones contributed nothing to their salvation. So when you stand before Christ, and that's the mystery of this text, when you stand before the judgment throne of God, you stand as a child of God, fully accepted in the beloved. Christ did not die, believer, listen to me. Christ did not die for you on Calvary so that the first time you look him in the face, you see a scowl because of all your failure. If that was the case, I would have no hope. I would curl up in a fetal position and just go die in the jungle. So we need to hold mystery, I believe, in this text. Others may disagree with me, but there is a real judgment for your stewardship, and it is extremely important, and it ought to be a motivation in your life. You ought to walk circumspectly. You ought to look at the gifts that God has given you. My son and I have had a conversation many times before he came here. He said, but Dad, a lot of people are going to know I'm your son and I'm not like you. What's going to happen when they say, well, you're not like your dad? I said, tell him this. Tell him your dad knows that you're not like him. And he loves you. And is proud of you. And just wants you to walk for Christ, but according to the will of Christ for your own life. And I say the same for you. I meet students here sometimes, they go, well, I'm not in the ministry, I'm not going to be a preacher, I'm not going to be... What do you think that's like, going down somehow? As a matter of fact, the most godly people I've ever met were not in the ministry. I know a man in Iowa who has a gravel company, a gravel pit. And he is the most godly human being I have ever been with. He runs a gravel pit. First time I met him, and you know me, I'm an old reformed dude. The first time I met him, I broke down crying. I've just never met anybody that godly. So when I talk about you're going to be judged, I'm not saying go to the mission field unless God's telling you to go to the mission field. I'm not saying be a preacher. I'm saying in whatever station you have been called, it is still required of you, if you trust in the blood of Christ, that you do it all for Him. And it changes the world. I can tell you how many businessmen, doctors, and others that I know, construction workers, who have so glorified God. So whatever you're going into, if it's not preaching, it doesn't make you less. But listen, you say, oh, well, that's good news. Well, let me give you some bad news. It also doesn't let you off the hook. You're just as required as anyone else to have one singular ambition, to do what you do for the glory of Christ.